Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, selamat pagi, selamat datang ke FSAI 2021 Film Masterclass dengan topik pembuatan film dokumenter dan sinematografi drone. And for our Australian contingent, good morning all. Saya senang sekali berada di sini bertemu dengan rekan-rekan semua. Terima kasih atas kehadiran Anda. Nama saya Eleanor Daly, Konsul Publik Diplomasi di Konsulat Jenderal Australia di Bali. Sebelum kita mulai acara ini, saya ingin memberikan informasi bahwa fasilitas interpretasi simultan dalam bahasa Indonesia tersedia sepanjang masterclass ini di bawah kanan. Acara ini merupakan bagian dari rangkaian program Festival Sinema Australia Indonesia 2021 yang diselenggarakan dari 18 sampai 27 Juni. Kami ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Institut Seni Indonesia dan Pasar, Badan Kreatif dan Pasar, Stikom, dan Pembicara sebagai partner-partner kami dalam penyelenggaraan Film Festival Masterclass pada hari ini. Dan juga ingin mengucapkan terima kasih yang khusus kepada Prof. Dr. Wayan Admiana, Rektor ISI dan Pasar, Bapak Putu Yuliarta, Kepala Bekraf dan Pasar, Bapak Made Artana, Ketua Yayasan Pembicara, Bapak Dr. Dandan Hermawan, Rektor Stikom Bali, Ibu Maria Lobo, Ketua Bagian Kerjasama Universitas Nusa Tenggara NTT, dan Romi Hidayat, Presiden Asosiasi Alumni Australia di NTB. Baiklah, pertama-tama saya ingin mengucapkan selamat datang kepada para pembicara dalam Film Masterclass hari ini, yaitu Jaimen Hudson dari film dokumenter Jaimen Hudson From Sky to Sea, Bapak Leighton De Barros dari CDOG TV Internasional, dan Ibu Marissa Anita sebagai sahabat FSAI 2021 yang akan menjadi moderator pada acara ini, dan atasan saya, Ibu Anita Griffin, Konsul Jenderal di Bali. Sebelum kita memulai acara ini, mari kita saksikan sama-sama video singkat FSAI 2021.
Anything you want to say to the animals of Sanctuary City?
Yeah, I'm going back to bed.
Seperti yang Anda saksikan, FSAI merupakan sebuah kesempatan besar bagi masyarakat Indonesia untuk menyaksikan film-film terbaik Australia dan Indonesia. FSAI ini adalah platform untuk membangun koneksi dan kolaborasi antara industri film Indonesia dan Australia. Dan ini adalah tahun ke-6 dari FSAI 2021, di mana untuk pertama kalinya dalam sejarah penyelenggaraan festival ini diadakan secara virtual untuk memberikan kesempatan kepada para penonton film Indonesia di seluruh Nusantara untuk dapat mengakses film-film terbaik Australia dan Indonesia secara gratis. FSAI 2021 menghadirkan 6 film Australia dan 2 film Indonesia dengan beragam genre. Film mulai dari animasi, komedi, hingga horor. Semua film FSAI 2021 tersebut dapat langsung diakses dan ditonton oleh teman-teman yang hadir hari ini secara gratis melalui website FSAI, yaitu fsai2021.com. Di situ. Silakan daftar online dan pilih film yang ingin ditonton. Untuk memulai acara ini, langsung saya persilakan Ibu Anita, Konsul Jenderal Australia, Konsulat Jenderal di Bali, untuk menyampaikan kata sambutan. Terima kasih, Ibu Anita.
Good morning, Prof. Dr. Wayan Adhyana, Rector Institute Seni, Indonesia, Denpasar. And thank you to our esteemed festival partners in Bali, Bekraf Denpasar, Institute Seni Indonesia, Pembicara and Sticom Bali for your support. Welcome also to Leighton De Barros, Emmy-nominated producer and cinematographer, and Jaimen Hudson, drone cinematographer. And good morning to all our participants from across Indonesia, and in particular our film students based in Bali, NTB and NTT. And also, last but not least, our moderator, Marissa, Anita, and MC Ellie Daly. My name is Anita Griffin. I'm the Consul General at the Australian Consulate General, Bali. And it's my great pleasure to warmly welcome you all to this masterclass today. We are delighted to offer this masterclass. It's one of the highlights of the Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia, and it's in a virtual format this year. The last 15 or so months have been such a difficult time for the arts industries, as events and festivals have been postponed or cancelled, and travel and human interaction limited. And throughout this pandemic, people have pivoted their work, social lives and interests to virtual platforms. And it's wonderful to see how human ingenuity and determination can overcome adversity and find new ways to interact. This theme is also reflected in the topic of today's masterclass on the documentary and drone cinematography film Jaimen Hudson, From Sky to Sea. It's a documentary about the incredible life story of quadriplegic cinematographer Jaimen Hudson and his quest to dive and make films 12 years after an accident confined him to a wheelchair. This is an amazing story about Jaimen's journey and how he faced these challenges with such humour and grit. Further, this documentary's portrayal of the incredible power and beauty of our shared oceans and marine life is so important in focusing all of our attention on the urgency and importance of protecting these vital ecosystems. Through this festival, we seek to promote Australia's creative industries and Australian films directly to Indonesian audiences. We want to show how vibrant our film industry is as it pushes boundaries in subject matter, technical innovation and accessibility, and we seek to promote collaboration between our people and our film industries. We are so delighted to have online today Jaimen discussing the technical details of using drones in filming this production, and Leighton talking about the unique behind-the-scenes logistics of making this film. Thank you so much, Jaimen and Leighton, and thank you all again for joining us. Please enjoy this opportunity to learn how this documentary was made, and I encourage you to participate actively. Thank you again, and selamat menikmati. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih banyak Ibu Anita. Selanjutnya saya juga ingin menampilkan video kata sambutan dari Profesor Wayan Adhyana, Rektor Institut Seni Indonesia di Denpasar. Silakan Bapak Wayan.
Om Swastiastu, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Salam, Nama Budaya, Rahayu. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Australian Embassy in Indonesia. Your Excellency, the international speakers and instructor of FSAI or Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia 2021. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let us rise to the presence of God, the merciful God who has bestowed our pleasure for the health, the opportunities, and the happiness we feel today. Without His mercy, it is impossible for all of us to join this event. Furthermore, I would like to extend my biggest gratitude to the Committee of FSAI 2021 for the opportunity given to Indonesian Institute of the Arts Denpasar as an event partner of FSAI 2021 and explore more knowledge, especially on the cinema development, especially on documentary, drone cinematography, and also animation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the development of cinema in Indonesia has a long history, date back to 19 until 1920s, and documentaries of Indonesian nature and culture has become big point as a media to introduce Indonesia worldwide. Therefore, FSAI 2021 Masterclass, documentary filmmaking and drone cinematography will come a great chance to all of the participants to enhance skill and technique is producing excellent film in documentary, drone photography, and animation. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I sincerely hope that such event be repeated regularly because it is a bridge to create firm mutual understanding among Indonesian Institute of the Arts Denpasar and Australian Embassy in Indonesia. I would also to conclude my remark by sending my warm regard to all speakers and instructors for your valuable thoughts and knowledge that I really believe those might bring new perspective for all of participants. In the end, I wish all success for the FSAI 2021, and I am looking forward to another opportunity for having to collaboration again. Thank you very much. Om Santi Santi Om. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih banyak Profesor Dr. Wayan Adiana atas videonya. Teman-teman, sesi tanya jawab akan tersedia setelah presentasi dari masing-masing pembicara. Jika rekan-rekan mau bertanya, via chat Zoom juga dipersilakan dari masing-masing dalam bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris. Sesaat lagi kita akan bersama-sama mengikuti masterclass bersama dua pembicara kita. Sekarang saya ingin mengundang moderator untuk diskusi pada hari ini. Dia adalah sahabat FSAI 2021, seorang aktris yang telah mendapatkan pujian, nominasi, dan penghargaan di berbagai film festival, baik lokal maupun internasional, sekaligus berkontribusi terhadap dunia jurnalisme. Dia adalah kebanggaan Indonesia dan alumni Australia, Ibu Marissa Anita. Halo Kak Marissa, apa kabar? Marissa?
Sorry, I was muted. Hai, Eli, kabar baik. Kabar kamu gimana?
Oh, baik, sehat. Alhamdulillah.
That's great.
Thank you so much. Dan dari saya tidak ada usah berlama-lama, silakan mengambil ahli diskusi ini. Terima kasih Kak Marissa.
Oke, thank you Ellie. Halo teman-teman semua, selamat pagi dan selamat datang ke Masterclass hari ini tentang pembuatan film dokumenter dan sinematografi drone. Dua pembicara kita hari ini akan berbagi ilmunya tentang seni pembuatan film dokumenter dan juga sinematografi menggunakan drone. Nah, kelas hari ini memang akan cenderung membahas hal-hal yang cukup teknis. Jadi kalau misalnya buat orang-orang teknis yang mau nanya tentang kamera, lensa, dan sebagainya, ataupun jenis drone-nya, bisa langsung ditanyakan ke narasumber kita pagi ini. Tapi bagi teman-teman yang punya pertanyaan non-teknis seputar membuat dokumenter pun silakan saja ditanyakan kedua ahli kita ini. Nah, kita akan bicara tentang alat apa saja yang dipakai untuk membuat film dokumenter from sky to sea, dan juga proses produksi film ini. Saya perkenalkan kepada teman-teman sekalian, pembicara kita di pagi hari ini ada dua. Yang pertama saya bacakan dulu CV-nya ya. Jaimen Hudson dan Leighton De Barros ini terlibat dalam film Sky to Sea, kisah yang sangat inspiratif yang juga menghadirkan gambar-gambar yang memukau sepanjang film. Saya sudah nonton, semoga teman-teman juga sudah nonton. Jadi sejak 2015 ini, Jaimen Hudson menggeluti profesinya sebagai fotografer dan videografer drone. Dia ini sangat berbakat dalam menangkap gambar fenomena alam dan hewan dengan luar biasa menggunakan drone. Video yang ia buat selama ini telah ditonton 250 juta kali, dan pada 2018 dia menerima penghargaan Western Australia's Young Achiever untuk kategori Online Achievement dan juga People's Choice. Jaimen juga finalis Young Australia of the Year di tahun 2019. Sementara itu Leighton De Barros, dia adalah sutradara film dokumenter ini. Ia juga merupakan penerima nominasi Emmy Award 4 kali, punya pengalaman banyak banget, lebih dari 30 tahun di industri televisi sebagai produser, sutradara, penulis, dan juga sinematografer, terutama di dokumenter wildlife. Leighton juga cinta sekali alam bebas dan juga dunia bawah air. Ia telah memenangkan lebih dari 15 penghargaan industri dan juga sudah bekerja untuk berbagai international film production dan channel. Contohnya seperti Netflix, Discovery Channel, Nat Geo, Geographic Channel, dan lain sebagainya. Ia juga berperan sebagai CEO dari C-Doc TV International. Nah, selama mendengarkan para ahli, kalau teman-teman punya pertanyaan atau punya komen, silakan dicatat dulu dan langsung saja diketik di kolom chat. Nanti akan kita jawab pada sesi tanya-jawab setelah diskusi. Langsung saja kita sapa speakers di pagi hari ini. Hello, Jaimen and Leighton. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge this morning. We really appreciate your time with us this morning. So maybe I'll start with Jaimen first. Jaimen, could you please tell us about how you got started doing movie or film with drones, and of course your experience on the set of your film, Jaimen Hudson from Sky to Sea, as a drone cinematographer?
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, I first got into taking photos and videos when digital cameras were first released in their infancy, really, back when I was just young and I started to dive and I wanted to capture what I saw underwater and share it with the world. I was never into spearfishing or anything like that. I preferred to take pictures, not fish home with me. And then basically that was just a bit of a hobby, really. I just did that and I would upload them to my computer and I would never do anything with the vision or the photos. They would just sit there. But I had a motorbike accident in 2008 that left me a quadriplegic and unable to access the hobbies I used to love, like diving, surfing, skateboarding, all of those things. And I was looking for a hobby, and one day a gentleman came into the shop, and it turned out he was the chief marketing officer for DJI, which is the largest drone manufacturer in the world. And he utilized our vessel to go down to see Lake Hilly, which is the beautiful pink lake on Middle Island. And he gave me some of the vision to see. And I was immediately just blown away by the cool perspective it gave you. And I thought perhaps that is something I'd be able to do from my wheelchair. And then after that, I would research, how do the joysticks work on the remote? Will I be able to do it with my reduced hand function? For the people at home, that's basically how my hands are. I can't open and close them. So my family, I think, got sick of me researching constantly, and they said, why don't you just buy one? And if you can't use it, we'll sell it. So we bought one, and I was immediately hooked right away. And then it just engulfed me. All I wanted to do was go out and try and film wildlife. So we would search up and down the coastline and It's like that old saying, a watched kettle never boils. Well, wildlife that you look for, you never find. I was looking all the time and never saw it until one day we filmed this video that's now on YouTube called Dolphin Haze, which is where the dolphins are surfing in the waves. And that was my first foray into wildlife cinematography. And from that moment forward, I've just been in love with it, and I've been very lucky to have some success with it. And of course, now collaborated with Leighton on a few different projects. In particular, this one, our documentary From Sky to Sea, that follows my life's journey from someone walking around to someone in a wheelchair, a bit uncertain about their life, and my journey to get back in the water again for the first time in 12 years and try and film some different wildlife species underneath the surface.
Yes. Sorry, I think my connection just dropped this just then, but I think...
Oh no, I'm bored her.
Am I freezing like this? Yes, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying, because I just dropped for about 2 seconds, so I'm okay. So about that documentary, Jaimen Hudson, From Sky to Sea, I think probably Leighton can also chime in here. How did that idea come about? How did you meet Leighton and then suddenly come up with this idea that, hey, why don't we make this documentary about a father who wants to go back to the sea, but he actually has some physical limitation, but he wants to realize this dream, because you haven't been to the sea for about 12 years at that time, right, Jaimen? So how did you two come about? How did you two think of making this documentary?
Yeah, for sure. Look, so I knew Leighton since I was a young lad, really. He used to charter my family's boat to go out to film different wildlife, the southern right whales in particular, in a location about 200 kilometres from Esperance, where we live. And basically, we had a bit of a connection back then. I was probably only 7 or 10 at the time. And then many moons later, he chartered my family's boat again. And this was after my accident. And my dad said, oh, you should drop in the shop and say hello to him, which Leighton did. And we just got to talking again. But nothing, I hadn't even started droning at that stage. And then eventually I got into droning. And we just happened to be on the same drone course at the same time. When I was getting my commercial license to fly a drone commercially in Australia, you need a commercial license. Leighton happened to be there. He said he loved what I'd been doing with the videos, and that he thought I had a really cool story, and it would be great to make it in a documentary. And I thought, of course, oh, wow, that sounds amazing. And then that was about it, really. Wasn't it, Leighton, for a while there until you and I connected again and we came up with a script, and I guess Leighton can go from there on how it all came to fruition.
And then it's convincing people to give you the money. That's the hardest part. So that took a little while, and we it took a little while, and ultimately in the end it was best that we took it as we made it as a cinema film to go in the cinema, and then we've got a distributor for television as well. So it's running on the cinema in Australia, and then it's being sold all around the world now as a television program. And Jaimen doesn't know this because he's on holidays, but we've been entering it in a lot of film festivals. So it's in about 6 or 7 film festivals all around the world at the moment. So hopefully it'll do okay.
That's great. That's great, guys. Well, congratulations as well. Sorry?
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about the technicalities of making this documentary as well. I've seen the documentary. Oh my God, the footage, the images that you include in this documentary is just mesmerizing. I remember there was this one scene where the whale, you were waiting for the whale, and Jaimen was on the boat with you, Leighton, and then just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then the whale came out and then suddenly started doing this with the fin and making this amazing sound, amazing nature sound. So what sort of equipments do you use in order to capture this amazing wildlife phenomenon? From Jaimen and Leighton, of course.
Jaimen, do you want to go first with the drones?
Yeah, I can do the drone first. Absolutely. So for me, droning is the choice of camera that I utilize. So we were flying off of the boat there. So you can imagine you sort of rocking around in the water and everything. And then Leighton would have a stills camera with him. You can see he's moving around the big lenses there. And we also had other camera crews on the boat. And then to capture some of those amazing sounds, as you can imagine, a drone doesn't have a microphone on it. So we're not capturing any of that at the same time. In the early days, they did actually have a microphone, but all you'd hear is the bzzz of the propellers.
Yeah.
So and other sound technicians have to go out there at a later stage and try and film these incredible peck slaps on the water that you hear, the spy hopping and the breaching, and then dub it over the top later.
All right, that's from the drone side. And I also heard that for filming this documentary, you actually used 3 different drones. Is that correct, Jaimen?
Yeah, cool. I'm sorry, am I going into my thing now? Is that what you want me to do?
Absolutely. Why not?
I was going to say, I was like, sorry. Okay, cool. Yeah. So basically, so we did utilize 3 different drones for this filming. I've had many different drones over the time since I got into it. When I first got into droning was late 2014. And all we had back then was you basically bought like the white part of the drone, the Phantom 2, I think it was back then. And then you get a GoPro, so I'm sure a lot of you know what a GoPro is. And you would attach it to the drone and you would send it off. And all it would do is either you had it to have it in like time capture mode. So it would just constantly take photo after photo after photo, or it would be filming and you couldn't change between that. You'd have to land the drone, change it back to video or vice versa, change it back to photos. And you'd have a very primitive downlink. So basically that would be what would show you what the drone is seeing. These days you can fly kilometers, but back then you would fly honestly 40 or 50 feet and it would cut out. So to see how far drones have come in that amount of time is incredible and something I've been very grateful to be a part of as they grow. And these days we on this production utilized 3 drones, and I personally have 3 drones that I alternate between. I have my DJI Inspire 2 that has the X5S camera connected to it. Now that's a big drone, a large drone that is fantastic for high winds, has a really good quality camera on it. So it has a micro 4/3 sensor. And as it flies through the air, the propeller actually lifts up out of the way. So the beautiful thing about that is when you're flying around, there's no chance of getting the prop in the vision. So you can't spoil your vision with that, particularly if you're flying into the sun with some of the smaller drones. As the propeller's spinning around, as it lets the sunlight in and out really quickly and the shutter speed on the drones going, you can actually notice the propeller spinning, which can be quite detrimental to some nice footage. And then I also have a couple of smaller drones. So I have a Mavic 2 Pro, which has been a great drone, nice and compact, one that you can just have in the car at all times. And more recently, the Air 2 S drone. So some of the benefits of those obviously is just compactability. You can just have it in the car. The flight time is really quite good. A bit of a downfall, the maximum they go up to is a 1-inch sensor. So micro 4/3 is a bit bigger, allows more light into the sensor, and you can get better images and video with that. And the smaller ones are a bit more limited in that regards. I guess the best thing is the drone that you have on you at the time. Like the best camera is the one you have on you. So I always just take with me in the car one of my little Mavic drones, and that's been the best thing for it. A few notes that I've always put down for people, I think, is the smaller ones are discreet as well. If you show up at a car park with a massive drone, some people feel like you might be trying to spy on them or something like that. So a nice discreet drone, one you can fly without disturbing too many people, is always a good thing as well. The drones these days have so many inbuilt features, but I think it's good to not rely too heavily on those. So you can imagine, you know, you can push a button to get your drone to come home and land itself. But if something were to go wrong, particularly if you're out on a boat like we were, for example, you start your drone flying at one location, but as the boat drifts, if you push return to home, the drone's going to go to a spot you're no longer at anymore. So I always recommend the best method is to learn how to fly the drone yourself using the joysticks. Just go out there and burn through your batteries. Even if you're not filming anything, just practice flying around, getting better at doing it. The automatic fly settings are no good for trying to film wildlife scenarios. They are good, for example, if you're out in the middle of a paddock or if you're sitting on the coastline and you want to get a beautiful wide sweeping shot of yourself sitting there. There's some really good settings with the latest smaller drones like Helix, Droney, where it'll fly away from you. So you can actually put the remote out of sight and it'll look like someone else is filming you doing these things. So we did use some of those for some of the nice coastal shots in the film. But particularly with dolphins and everything else, you really need to be flying the drone manually, cinematically as well, so nice and smooth. So just practicing flying as often as you can, and not relying on those automatic fly settings. I don't think. Land it if you can manually. Don't use the automatic to land settings. And that's what we were, focusing on heavily out on the water. Is I don't think you'd want to go out there and just start to fly the drone from a boat at any stage. As you had seen in the documentary, we lost one there, but I don't think that was my fault. I think it was the propeller issue there. But just getting out there, smaller ones with wildlife in particular, Mavic 2 Pro, you can only film in 4K 30 frames a second, which is a bit of a downfall because you want to slow-mo a lot of the shots that you're doing. So, you see the whale jump out of the water there, the dolphins riding the waves. A lot of those we've slowed down. So what you want to do is film in a higher frame rate. So 60 frames a second allows you to do that. So my big drone, the Inspire 2, we could shoot at 4K 60 frames. And the Air 2S that's recently been released, you can also film at 4K 60 frames a second. So they're the main ones we were utilizing. And the other issues we would have to face up there, aside from just utilizing the drones, is obviously having all the correct paperwork and everything. In Australia, to be near a whale, it's a crazy rule, to be honest with you, but it is the rule that they have. They say with a drone 300 meters away, so it's classed as a helicopter. So, I mean, 300 meters, you wouldn't even be able to see the whale just about. So Leighton and I obtained permits so that you could be within 20 meters of the whale. So that allows us to get a lot of these fantastic shots. While we were filming this documentary, this rule has since changed, but you're not allowed to film in a national park in Australia, or you weren't allowed to at that stage. That has changed. You are allowed to now, but we got permits to do that. And the other thing was as well, there's a big issue with if you're doing stuff commercially, you do need to obtain permits regardless. So that's another thing to do as well with the drones out there. A few other points with drones that I always recommend: never put your ISO over 100. The footage, the cameras on them just are not sufficient enough to have an ISO over 100. The footage gets extremely grainy. So always keep that down low and just adjust your aperture and your shutter speed. Always shooting in RAW, I find, is a great way to do it for your images. Basically, when you shoot on your mobile phone at the moment, you'll be shooting in a JPEG. So what that means is it takes a photo and then it compresses it down and deletes a lot of the information so that you don't have such a big file size, and it gives you a nice looking photo on your image. Same with a drone, they can shoot JPEG. Even your big DSLR cameras can shoot JPEG. But if you shoot in a RAW, it maintains a heap of information that later on, when you import it into a program like Lightroom or Photoshop, you can really increase a lot of the dark colors, bring up the shadows, the colors, and it won't blow the image out. It won't, what that means is make it all pixelated. So I always recommend shooting in RAW if you can, and really getting into the habit of shooting manual when you're filming and photographing. This is something that I learned over time, something that Leighton had to help me out with. I was shooting automatic because my main focus, particularly when you're filming wildlife, is a lot of the times I'm just cruising around the coastline. And when you see it, you know, dolphins surfing, you can't ask them to go surf the waves again. They quickly zoom through and it's all over. So I'd just get the drone, send it out there as quickly as I could, just in automatic mode, and I would film it. But what's happening is as you're going through different light scenarios, like say a wave crashes and you've got a beautiful blue wave, dolphin surfing, but then all of a sudden as it crashes and the whitewash appears, that's making the camera sensor freak out a little bit. So all of a sudden it's got this bright white light, so it shuts down the shutter or the aperture to try and focus on the white light. So all of a sudden you've got these fluctuations in your footage, which as you put it up on a big screen or a larger computer look terrible, to be honest with you, and also make it very hard for people to color grade and do everything in post. So I really recommend flying in manual. And it's one of those things that I used to do is I would put it in automatic just to get a little bit of an idea of what the camera thought was best to do. And then I would flick back to manual and I would have a little bit of a play with those adjustments myself. And what I've learned over time is obviously you can fix stuff up in post, but quite often with video, you don't want to overexpose it. You know, you really want to try and get that correct. Images have a little bit more leeway where you can adjust them around, but it's definitely worthwhile. Perhaps with images, you can overexpose them a little bit more, because if they're underexposed, if I'm filming or photographing a sunset and what I want to do is then brighten it up later, that's when you get extremely pixelated or the white flecks in there coming through. Whereas if you need to dull it down, you don't face those issues. So a few notes of things I've learned over the time, you know, it's a bit safer to overexpose your sunsets and things like that, because then you can put a gradient filter on and pull the sky back down to the darker color. And with your video, you pretty much want to be on point with that. I was just trying to have a little look through some of the other notes I've made here. Sorry about this.
It's all right. So basically you're saying it's much better to have some blown out footage because you can always dial it down.
Well, images, photos, yeah. And not too, mainly with sunsets and stuff like that. But yeah, that was sort of the main gist, I guess, of what I wanted to talk about with the drone side of things. But I think these days, it's funny, every time I see people and they see I'm drone, they're like, oh, you can just get them to fly themselves, can't you? But I always try and stress to people, I think it's better to know how to do it yourself, how to fly the drone, bring it back to the vessel, and that way you can really get yourself some nice cinematic shots. And I didn't see if any questions or anything popped up during that, but perhaps it would be better for me to go to those if anyone wants to ask me anything. I might be better to assist you that way.
Yeah. So what is the editing tool that you both use for this film usually?
So I utilize, for this film, Leighton, you answer that one, please, mate. Yeah.
Very basically, I use Premiere Pro to assemble the interviews, but our professional editors use Avid Media because that's the top of the line professional editing tool. That's the industry standard. I know films are produced and made in Premiere, but Avid is, in our opinion, far superior, has a far more broader, it's a tool to work with databases and outputting certain files, and then grading in DaVinci Resolve, which is incredible. And I just wanted to pick up before I start my spiel on what Jaimen says. And Jaimen's an incredible cinematographer and photographer. He's got an eye. He was born with a very good eye for taking photos. And what he said is correct about how he shoots his raw photos. Then conversely, if you start to use cameras, and I will talk about the Sony range and the Panasonic range where they have their own S-log profiles. And I'm not banging on Jaimen for saying the wrong thing, but they do overexpose. So when you start using a log on a camera, like in the Sony camera that we use, which is an S-log 3, you will actually overexpose and then you bring that down in post. So when you're shooting outside of a log, do what Jaimen says, and you have to get your exposure spot on. But these cameras are set up to overexpose like a raw image, and then you bring it all down in post, but then it's a lot of work.
Leighton's always trying to get me to shoot in a log, but I unfortunately I don't. I should do, but it is a lot of work in post. Yeah.
And when you do shoot in a log, and Jaimen and I first started doing that, and I was encouraging him to do that, your image looks flat and horrible because it's a digital negative. There's no contrast in it because you bring that contrast back in post-production. But it's horrible. You look at it and it's all washed out. And what your camera does internally, you apply a thing called a LUT, a lookup table, to your viewfinder, and that emulates what the footage will look like. So that helps you expose and helps you focus. So there's lots of different cameras on the market with all your Blackmagic cameras, your Sonys, your Panasonics, your Canons, and they all have their own different versions of these logs. So you just got to find the ones that it's more suitable. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Leighton, for chiming in. Do you want to start with your explanation, your presentation?
Yes, I shall present.
Cameras and lenses and everything?
Yes, I'll present away. So not as interesting as Jaimen, but my background is, passion is cinematography. I've been doing it for 30 years. I love filming wildlife, and I've filmed everything from African wildlife, through to the most venomous snakes on earth, and then doing a lot of diving with whales, dolphins and sea lions, sharks, and even the odd sea snake that came up to give us a bit of a fright. So I'll actually just begin. It is wonderful to make films, and my passion is actually being in the field filming, whether it's in the bush or on the ocean. But 90% of the work is done as a producer and a director and a writer. For me, that gets a bit monotonous because you're sitting in front of a desk and a computer, but my passion is to be out filming like Jaimen. So I'll start with the equipment, and I'll start with the equipment that's very particular to this film. So we used 12 cameras. We had at one stage two Sony FS7s. We had the Sony A7S. This is just for the technical people out there. We had the red Epic Dragon, Panasonic GH4, Panasonic GH5. We had, Jaimen had 2 or 3 drones. I brought a drone along. We had 2 GoPro 8s, 3 Sony action cameras. So it's about 4 cameras all up. And this is, once you get into the editing, the production, the people who grade the film and match it up, as you would know, Marissa, they do an amazing job because they matched 14 cameras up, plus all Jaimen's stills. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. And Jaimen's was wonderful. He took a lot of, and Jess, his wife, took a lot of video footage on their phones. So we integrate that when we couldn't be there. So it's a wonderful process. So listen, to all the students here, and we know technology is incredible, and camera technology is just out of control these days. So it's a wonderful thing because you can get your hands on some very high-end cameras for reasonable prices. But I actually think, in my opinion, the lens technology, and what I'll talk about today is these lens adapters, which have sort of revolutionized what you can put on the camera, because you can have, the Sony A7S, or you've got your Panasonic GH series, which is what we use. But I always thought the lenses let them down. So we always have, and we've had these L series lenses that form the Canon L series lens, forms the basis of my kit. And we've had them for about 15 years. They're pretty tough. They're pretty tough because we've been all around the world with them. And so I always wanted to put the best lenses in our cameras. So a mob called Metabones came up, and they're quite incredible. They invented these Metabones adapters, and basically they will you can put a Canon lens on any other camera. So like for the Panasonic GH4, which is our first GH4, which is a medium 4/3 lens. So that would never fit, you know, clunk, it'll never work. So they thought, all right, we'll whack these on. So basically you put that adapter on, oh my God, it's not working. And then you can use any Canon lens. And then you have these very superior top of the range Canon lenses you can put on these cameras. And I sent a little, and so therefore you get these wonderful lenses on these, you know, cheaper cameras, and it gives you much better, I believe, much better image. So
I have that as well here, Leighton. Oh, can you see Metabones? Hang on. Oh, can you see it there?
Yes, I can. There you go. See, you're up to with it. You're on date.
It's actually my husband's.
Oh,
he was
well,
just showing this one.
He's allowed to spend all the money.
There we go. Please do continue. Sorry.
Sorry, that's good. I should get you to take the lesson. Oh, not the lesson. but also what happens too is because if people are interested in sensor size, because you've got a medium format sensor, these lenses are full frame sensors. So automatically it's only seeing the guts of the lens. So you're getting a 2 times focal distance. So this is a 100 to 400 mil. So it automatically becomes 200 to 800. So you're getting a much better focal distance. It means you lose the back end of the lens, but then you're seeing the guts of the lens, which is the high quality part. So the 800 mil lens is wonderful for wildlife stuff if you're doing birds or any animal that you don't want to get close to.
Yeah,
that's that part of it. We use the red camera to get all our breaching, our 4K 100 frames a second footage. And then we shoot in red raw, which is like the raw version, what Jaimen was saying. This is the Sony FS7, so that's a Sony camera. So I would say this is the best camera I've had in 30 years. It's been, you know, in bushfires, it's been on boats, it's been in you know, full drive smashing around in the dust and the dirt, and it's still working. That is an E-mount, so it's a super 35 mil sensor, so it's a little bit bigger than the MFT sensor, but it's still not as wide as the full frame, and that's got the Metabones adapter on it too. So this one, that Metabones adapter is called a speed light, and they're quite incredible. And what they do is they actually give you a wider angle because it's got a magnifier in it, but it also gives you more sensitivity. So it gives you another stop of light, which is what you need. So it's a really good all-round lens if you want to be inside, just say you're in a bushfire truck and you're bouncing along and you can go wide, and then you can shoot the fire out the front. You can actually, you know, zoom in. So I find that system there is a wonderful system. Really tough camera, and I've had it for 7 or 8 years, and next camera we get will probably be a Black Magic, but that's done really well. And then I will just show everybody what we use underwater, and this is the underwater system that we used on Jaimen's film. So that basically is that's Panasonic GH5, and we shoot that in Panasonic's log, which is the raw, whatever their log's called, I can't even remember. No, it's not S-log, I can't remember. Cine like D or something it's called. So as you can see, there's no
Vlog.
Look at you.
Vlog.
Yes, she's right.
Nice. I got my cheat sheets from my husband, who's actually right next to me, but you can't see him. Anyway, go on.
We should bring him on too, I think. Yeah. So you got your Vlog. So very good, Marissa's husband. He's a smart fella.
Andrew.
And basically, that's there's no, once you get the housing made for these, you can't put an adapter on. So this is a very good Panasonic Vario lens. I think it's 7 to 14 mil, so it's very wide. We then put these teeth on it, and that's what meshes with the housing. And these housings are very simple. They're very good, actually. You put a base plate on them, and they simply click in. They simply just click in like that. You switch there's a flick there. A switch that you lock it in, and then your camera's ready to go. what I didn't show you and what is very good with this system is that there's the back of it. So that's the back of it. That back of it's got a little sensor, and so that sensor will tell you if water gets in it. So you switch this switch on, and a little light comes on, a little bottle of light comes on there, and there's 2 probes. And if you touch them, oh, you hear that horrible sound. That means water's got in. So it's a really good thing. It gives you a visual cue with a green light. And then you don't want water getting in your housing, because then your wife tells you off because you've got to make an insurance claim and you get into trouble, and you don't want to get into trouble with your wife, do you? Because then life's not worth living. So then you pack that on. You've got a couple of there's a lapse cut sound. I'll just show you one more thing, which is very smart. Then what they do is they give you a vacuum pump, and there's a little nozzle here, and then you will pump the air out, which creates a negative pressure, I think. Yeah, negative pressure. And there's a little green light that'll go on here, and if that housing gets compromised, the light will flash as well, and then that sensor will also start beeping, so you can get out of the water and get into trouble and make your insurance claim. And so that's the main camera that we used underwater when we filmed Jaimen when he was diving. And for our other productions, and I'll just wrap this up, we 2 productions in particular for National Geographic, we had to film dolphins in very shallow water. And as Jaimen said, we're all familiar with GoPros. We didn't want to use a GoPro because they're not good enough quality. So we wanted to use this. This is a National Geographic approved camera. So what we had to do was we had to put it on a big aluminium pole and stand in the water. And as the dolphins came past, we would just do this and get the shot. And then the whales, and then when the whales would come up to the boat, we'd put it in and do that. So my biggest worry was, how are we even going to see what we're doing? So what we did, these are the old GoPro housings. I think it's a GoPro 4 or 6. Basically what we did was we found a company in America, and this has got a GoPro mount on it. And basically we're able to put the GoPro in the housing on a mount, bring the cable up the pole about 2 or 3 meters to a monitor, and then you could actually see what you were shooting. And you would actually then roll the GoPro, roll the underwater housing. So effectively you were getting 2 shots, and it acted like a viewfinder. So what you have to do is, as a student or even a producer now, you have to think of cheaper ways that you can sort of make the best out of both gear. This camera does have an HDMI out port here, where you can run an HDMI port out to a monitor, but it's very expensive, breaches the housing. So it just means there's another place where the housing can potentially be breached and water go in. So that's about it from me. But other than that, listen, it was a wonderful experience working with Jaimen. You know, we do these seminars, and we do these, well, it's a seminar, I suppose, and everyone says, oh, you know, what Jaimen, what did you learn from Leighton? It's like, probably didn't learn much. But no one asked me what I learned from Jaimen, and I learned a lot about drone filming, because I do a lot. I thought I did a lot of drone filming, but no one films as much as him. I learned that Jaimen is probably the best drone cinematographer I know. He flies, he's probably got thousands and thousands of hours under his belt. I've probably only got hundreds. And it was wonderful, because even when Jaimen and I live about 1,000 kilometers apart, and even when I had problems flying my drone, I could just ring him up. Sometimes he had issues with connection with the satellites or whatever, and I would just ring him up, and he would just say, do this, this, and this. And okay, switch it off, and I'd get it going. So I feel like I'm very lucky, because he focuses on the drones and he knows so much about them. He's an invaluable resource. So I can just call him up and bug him whenever I want.
Is he still bugging you until now, Jaimen? From time to time?
I think I ask him lots of questions, so there's it's a two-way bugging street, so it's all good.
Yeah, and that's where you got to look at these collaborations are two-way. And listen, Jaimen had a lot of input into the film as well, because it's his life story. And I suppose if your student, we call them students, or the people at university are out there, they're going to make a film about someone, you really got to work with the person, because, you know, there's 90 minutes of Jaimen and his life has been portrayed, and he's not a person who looks for sympathy. We had a few issues when we had a writer come in, and, you know, she was writing something that both of us weren't really happy with. And
what was it about? Briefly, if you can.
Beg your pardon?
What was it about? What was the angle that you weren't happy about at that time?
Did you want to ask Jaimen? No.
I just believe it was, she was just trying to make it very like I was, there was two people that got involved. I think that we weren't all that happy with. There's always someone trying to put their nose in and give an opinion. But this lady in particular was trying to make it all about the disability and how I wasn't getting my fair crack in the film world and all this sort of stuff. And to be honest with you, I was just saying that I think I've had almost probably more opportunities come my way because of my disability. Like, people want to involve me and help me. And I've been very, very grateful for the opportunities I've received. So I didn't want it to be portrayed that way, you know, like, even though it might add drama to the story, sometimes I don't agree with, you know, scripted drama, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I completely agree with Leighton. I watched the documentary and I was just mesmerized. And there were moments even when I got teared up, just because the amazing footage that you took from the sky. It's just insane, because back then, before drone existed, we had air photography, right? And now we have drone photography as well. So, but since drone is accessible to quite a lot of people now, what's your tip, Jaimen, to drone photographers or filmmakers? How do we make our footage stand out? It's almost like the phenomenon of back then people would take pictures with proper camera, DSLR. And then suddenly phones like this, they have cameras as well. And suddenly people can take pictures and they put filter and everything. And I guess a similar sort of trend happened to air photography, and now it's drone photography. So how do we create images that just stand out, Jaimen?
I think, you know, it's like anyone, I guess, can take a photo on their phone, but a lot of them are, you know, cruddy photos, aren't they? Sadly. So it's a matter of really trying to get good subject matter, lining things up well, good lighting, you know, learning how to edit them correctly in post, learning how to stitch multiple images into one. So panoramas, you know, drones can do that as well, but they don't do a very good job. So the best thing would be to take multiple angles yourself and then stitch them manually yourself, you know. And these are all things I had no idea how to do. And just watch YouTube videos and teach yourself, you know, become a student of your passion and your hobby. And mine is aerial photography. And then very persistent, you know, you need to go and watch 20 cruddy sunsets, and then hopefully the 21st will be an awesome one, and you'll be glad you've been out there all the other afternoons. Wildlife in particular for me is so incredible. And I mean, you get the coastline in Bali and everything like that. Yeah, you guys have a beautiful place to do photography over there. Or even go film surfing, you know. But particularly for me is just being persistent with wildlife, going out around the coastline every morning, and you know, 99% of the time you don't see anything. 0.5% of the time you see something, but it's not that good. But it's that other 0.5% of the time that you get, you know, dolphins and whales, or the dolphins surfing. And that's what I've kind of become known for, is the wildlife stuff. So I just try and get out there and you know, look for it as often as possible. And I even go back now and re-edit photos or re-edit videos that I've done, you know, now that I have a you know, more sound knowledge of how to put together a sequence and things like that I learned through Leighton on the documentary process, just redoing that. And at the end of the day as well, don't be so caught up on how many likes you're getting on an image maybe, or anything like that. Just do it because you like doing it. If you love doing it, then you're only going to get better, and just enjoy yourself, really. That's the main thing. I love sitting there editing photos while you're listening to a podcast or watching something in the background, you know, just as long as you're having fun, then I know it sounds cliche, but that is definitely the most important thing.
Absolutely. I have one more question before we go to the questions from. How many days did it take you, or how many months or years did it take you to finally make this documentary and present it to the audience? Because I know that, well, as you've also mentioned, Leighton and Jaimen, when you are documenting wildlife, it really depends on the animals, right? They're not actually going to act beautifully in front of you. You just have to wait. So I imagine it's a lot of waiting.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know. I'll guess. I tell you what did almost go perfectly though is when we went diving with that whale shark and the humpback whales and the dolphins. We couldn't have got any more lucky there, because we were up in Exmouth for a week, which is where I am now, ironically enough. And we had that boat chartered for 3 days. And that was just wham, wham, wham. We got so very, very lucky. I think the stars aligned. And, like I said at the end of the documentary, I think the ocean knew I was back and welcomed it with open arms. So every now and then you get, a bit of preparation aligns with charm and luck, and you get what you need to. But the documentary itself, would you say 3 years, Leighton, it took us?
From when I first saw Jaimen and reconnected, probably 6, and we start talking to Jaimen, getting a story. My first any protocol is just to write a page up, start to Jaimen. He's happy with that page synopsis, and then we get that, start shopping that around. And it took about 3 years to we actually probably got some interest, and then I was very lucky. Our state film funding body would sort of help fund me to come down and chip away with Jaimen and major milestones in his life and his family life. We filmed family life before we got funded, and then we got the money, and then we did the trip. So yeah, Jaimen's 3 years in production, shooting and chipping away, but at least 3 years before, just trying to get gravity in the market. And I don't know if it's because of disability film, but we had National Geographic on board at one time, and then they drop out, and just it's really hard. I know that you're an actress, and you've made a wonderful film that's called Ahli and Ratu.
Yeah, Ahli and Ratu Queens. Well, thank you, Leighton.
Yes. And it's a complex, long process, isn't it? And it's the same with Jaimen, And but we got there in the end, and that's the main thing. Yeah.
One thing I would say as well is I would have given up after the first company gets knocked back, because I was like, I've said to Leighton on the phone, I'm like, do we even want to make this if no one seems to want it, But I guess these days that you can see it from a channel's point of view, or no one wants to, they're like, oh, well, bring it to us once you've made it, and then if it's good, we'll buy it. You know what I mean? Whereas like getting money to make it is the hard bit. But Leighton and Joni are stoic in their resilience, because I would give up long ago, but they stick at it. I guess they've been doing it long enough to know that you're going to get knockbacks, but that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means that those people aren't interested, or they don't have the funding at the time. So NHK came on board and helped out. But my advice to anybody out there would be to, if you think it's a good idea and, you're passionate about it, then stick at it, because eventually someone will see your passion and see your idea that you have and back it. And, as long as you're putting your heart and soul into it, then I'm sure it'll work out in the long run.
Yeah, I completely agree. Filmmaking is hard work, and it takes a lot of patience, a lot of creativity, but also a lot of patience. And I guess the 30-something years experience from Leighton creates that persistence. So well done, you, Leighton, for being so stoic and patient about it. And now the movie is actually out for us to enjoy. I will just say something in Indonesian to our audience. Jadi memang teman-teman, kalau bikin film itu ya, pasti depannya tuh susah-susah dulu, nyari funding itu pasti susah, harus ke festival segala macam untuk nyari fundingnya. Tapi selama teman-teman memang punya passion dan itu cintanya tuh membara banget, tantangan-tantangan seperti ini tentunya ya menjadi tantangan, tapi kita masih akan punya api atau semangat untuk melewati tantangan itu sampai kita menuju tujuan. Now we actually have some questions from our participants. I will read them one by one and you can answer them. The first one is from Firdaus, Jakarta Art Institute. This is what he says. He says, I think there will be new terms and jargons within the cinematography vocabulary with the inclusion of drone cinematography, which doesn't yet exist in the global consensus cinematography language. In your opinion, as a director, what is the best composition from a drone cinematography point of view? And how can drones build aesthetic constructions in your film? Thank you. That's from Firdaus.
Does Jaimen answer that? Or?
I think it was maybe directed at you, but immediately when they said composition, the only thing that came to mind is that's the beautiful thing of drones is you can send it up to 120 meters, or if you get a permit, you can go higher than that, and you can get, I was filming in Kalbarri the other day, and I was filming the gorges as they go down to the water, and you can just get this incredible view and the composition of that, you know what I mean, which is amazing. Or you can also come down really low, like the photos of Jess walking along the beach in the documentary, and get such a nice low image, which is like just a little bit higher than someone holding a camera, but it just gives you that unique perspective. And you can get those two shots from 120 meters down within a matter of moments, you know what I mean? So that is the beauty in my eyes, particularly as a disabled person, of why drones are so great, because I can sit in my one little spot and I can send it to those two different locations so extremely quickly. And prior to drones, it would have been a helicopter, which would have been $2,000 to $3,000 an hour. And I mean, helicopters still have their place because you can get some with incredible powered cameras on them. But, drones are rapidly, allowing us to capture some fantastic footage. And the composition you want to make with it, whether it be a bird's eye view of the coastline that's kind of abstract, almost like, when an artist painted a picture, and I guess it's the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, or it could be a photo of a wave breaking that's everyone can appreciate. They allow us to do so much.
Leighton, would you like to comment?
Sorry.
No, it's very good, and it depends. See, Jaimen works a lot on his own, so he's his own director. So it depends what he sees in the action, and depends what he wants to get out of it. And in terms of directing, well, I'm lucky I can look when most of the time I would say, Jaimen, just do your own thing, right? Just make sure you capture the action. And when he's on his own, he does his own thing. And even when I was on there, I was there. But just say if we were doing something like we're in a car driving, or a person walking, when it comes to directing a shot, you'll see it in many films, and as you would know, you just got to have a bit of leading room in the frame, so you don't put the person right at the frame when they're walking on to. So when it comes to composition, you just got to, it's what you're designing from that shot. So I would often talk to Jaimen and say, listen, for me, do this, because this is how I would do it. I never want to say to Jaimen, you should do this and you should do this, because he does his own thing. I don't want to impose my values on someone, but when I would say, Jaimen, please put the drone up for us now. And if there's a whale, I would like you to put the whale in the end third of the frame, as if it's going home, and you want to see where it's traveling to. And then I would ask him to say, Jaimen, can you please look straight down on the whales now? Because when, like Jaimen was saying, when you have a bird's eye view, it penetrates through the water more, so you actually get more clarity of the water. And sometimes we don't want to see land in the background. Sometimes you don't want to see a car or a boat in the background, so you want to isolate things. So we're very lucky. It doesn't have to be the terminology. Sometimes I would look over his shoulder say, Jaimen, can you please do this for me? When he's on his own or he's filming for us, I pretty much, he's competent enough to do everything on his own and make his own decisions. And so am I, but not as well, you know.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2, this is from Mustafa Rezai. What are the fundamental points every filmmaker should keep in mind for a better, or to create a better storytelling in documentary? Any tips on storytelling and scripting for beginners?
Well, I'll go first and then I'll let Jaimen talk. I mean, I think, and Jaimen, and when it comes back in some of the stuff, or it comes back to when Marissa asked Jaimen about cameras and how you can make things better. Well, Jaimen says find your niche, which is a wonderful idea. When it comes to making a documentary, very different to a feature film that Marissa worked on, is it's all about the story. You just got to have I think you've got to have a really, really good story. Because I could go and film a documentary on a GoPro, and as long as it's a good story, it'll stand up well, or you could get your $50,000, $80,000 red, and if the story's terrible, it's just not going to stand up. So really work on your story. We're very lucky that we had when I pinned Jaimen's story down, it was an amazing story, no matter which way you looked at it. We just didn't know how it was going to end. That's the risk that we took. We had a screening with Jaimen 3 weeks ago before he went up on the holidays, and I'd never thought it was like this, but some woman shouted, "Oh, it's a love story!" And it probably is, because it's about Jaimen and his wife, and how they enable, and his wife enables, lets Jaimen do whatever he wants. And I was only joking. No, she follows his passion, and they both follow each other's passion. So that's the story. I think it's all about story for Mustafa. Yeah.
Jaimen, would you like to add?
Sadly, mine glitched, so I missed all the question until Leighton started speaking. So I do apologise. I can hear the second what he said.
You want to
or
hear the question again? Okay, hang on. So this is from Mustafa Rezai. What are the fundamental points every filmmaker should keep in mind to create a better storytelling in a documentary? Any tips on storytelling and scripting for beginners?
Yeah, I think researching, it's just say you're making a documentary, not about, making sure you get all your facts down really well would be my advice. It's funny, with this documentary, a lot of the people that came into it were wanting to add drama, you know what I mean? 2 or 3 of the people that, and there is drama in there, absolutely, but it was natural drama, like it's the real life thing of me with my lungs and everything. And I think that's why we ended up deciding to wanting to go down the diving path, because we needed to give the story something, for the viewer to cling to. But I think, like Leighton said, just, sticking to the facts and trying to, teach people. If you think it's interesting and you've enjoyed learning about it along the way of writing the script, then there's a very good chance that the viewer will as well. So if they can learn something from it, particularly with a documentary, then you must be on the right path.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question before we go to question number 3. The thing about feature filmmaking and documentary filmmaking, the difference is you don't know the ending, right? With documentary filmmaking. So how do you deal with that? What's the process like? Because with a fiction film, the writer usually knows the beginning, the middle, and end. They pretty much have it already in their heads. They just need to write the script. But with you guys, that's not the case, right? So what sort of process does a documentary maker go through in order to create a compelling documentary at the end?
So we, and this is relevant to all the wildlife films we make. It's like Jaimen said, you got to research it and know your subject intimately. And you're right. And what you do is you write a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I would say for the end, you propose what happens, and at least you've got something you can go for. So we know I know where Jaimen works intimately, where he gets all his beautiful footage. We took him to another place to get some beautiful humpback whale footage. We knew at that time of year we would get something. What it was, we didn't quite know, but we knew we would get some amazing stuff. And then the risk was taking him and diving. So whatever happened, the risk was taking him and diving. We knew we'd get something, and we would just adapt at the end. If we didn't get really what we wanted, we would just say, Jaimen, how do you feel? And he might go, listen, I'm disappointed, but I still got to go back in the ocean again. And that made me happy. You just have to work with what you got. So to a certain extent, documentary making is very, very risky because it's real life and you don't know what you're going to get. But you just have to have 5 or 6 scenarios in your head to work with, and be a bit flexible and fluid. Yeah.
And I think as well, perhaps with you look at a lot of wildlife documentaries and they document themselves looking for that animal, don't they? You know what I mean? Or because then that can be, if they didn't get it, perhaps they can make the story about how hard they worked and how they slept and how long they were out there, and those sorts of things, so there's always an alternate ending to it, perhaps.
That's great. That's great. Okay, now question number 3 from Chizia. What is the best way to maintain drones or camera that has gone through high humidity? Ooh, technical.
Yeah, we don't have any humidity here in
Oh, we have a lot of that here.
Lucky buggers. No. It is funny, Leighton, remember we dealt with some serious humidity when we were filming me in the pool, because as soon as we went in there, all the cameras and everything like that. Look, sadly, I don't really know the answer to that question. They are designed pretty tough drones. I would just, I probably don't look after my stuff all that. I admit I try to, but at the end of the day, I buy them to fly them. So just dry it off with a cloth is what. Sorry, dry it off with a cloth and hopefully it'll be okay. Main thing is just making sure, I guess you pop your lens off and there's no condensation in the middle there, and dry it all before you fly it. What were we doing, Leighton? We would just let our cameras sit in that climate for some time, but prior to turning them on and filming.
So Jaimen's right. I suppose you've got those little satchels that you have, those little dry ball things that you can always keep around your gear, that they absorb the moisture, when you buy them. And we don't deal with any humidity. But when I worked on Survivor for CBS America, and we were in Thailand, and it was just horrendous, which I could, that's not a negative thing, but for us dealing with humidity, it's like, because we never deal with it, it's like, But basically what we did, and this is in the old days with tape, as soon as the day started, we turned the cameras on. So they built up their own heat. So they were as hot as the climate. So there was no, when you got them out into the humidity, they were warm, so they didn't condensate, because it condensates when the metal is cold and the exterior is hot or humid, then that creates a condensation. So when we did Survivor, they basically said, we're going in a cave, so it was even more bloody humid in the south of Thailand. And they said, start rolling your tapes as soon as you get, as you get on location. So basically, we burnt through hundreds and hundreds of tapes doing nothing, because they just said, because of the heat, that would keep them going. So I learned a little bit from that. So when we went to film Jaimen in the pool, it was very cold outside. It was very humid in the pool. So we started the cameras up long before we got in, and they were at least warm and warming before we got into that really humid environment. But then you can't do that if you're just sitting
hours before that.
If it's at home or anything, you can't just have it sitting on all the time. So maybe it's just a bit of pre-planning. Yeah.
So the preheating of the camera, is that like 15 minutes before or 30 minutes before, or?
It depends on your situation, I just knew it. And it's like Jaimen said, it's also the lens. So as you know, it gets, you'll get where the air can get in, you'll get that humidity building up in there, and that's a disaster. So then you just, basically we had to crack the we would have had to crack the cameras and let the warm air just wash over the cold air to heat it up. So we don't like humidity, you don't have to deal with it, so we're very lucky.
Sorry, Jaimen, you wanted to add?
You don't want to perhaps take them from an air-conditioned room. You know, say you're in your car, you're driving somewhere with your drone. Maybe, I don't know, maybe don't have the aircon on. I really don't know. I'm very sorry because we don't, unfortunately, deal with it over here. I can tell you how to fly one in the cold rain and the Australian climate.
We sometimes get cold rain as well, don't we, guys?
Every time I come there in winter, it's beautiful.
Today, this morning, it's particularly cold actually for me, maybe because I got out of a studio.
Come on, look, okay. Leighton and I are wearing jumpers. You guys are in t-shirts.
Yeah, I'm in my t-shirts. Okay, question number 4 from Dery Prananda, Yogyakarta. How about the story? Do you write scripts? And then the second question from him, from Derry, is how do you combine all the 14 camera footages in the editing? So the first one, I guess, probably what he's saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Derry, you know that some documentary makers actually kind of write it. If I'm not mistaken, Werner Herzog actually creates some of the scenes in his documentary. So he sort of writes it in and kind of have people act around it. This is, if I'm not mistaken. So what was your process? That's what Derry meant about how about the story? Do you write the script?
Yes, you do. You have to write a script because to sell the story, to get the funding, you have to write a script, and to sell, and then from that script you also have to budget and do your planning. And I had to learn Jaimen's story because I met him a long time ago, 25 years ago, and 20 years ago when he was a little boy, and then I lost track of his life. So I had to understand what are the major stages in his life. We actually had to understand about the accident, when and where it happened, the hospital process, the rehab process, the process of him coming home a little bit lost, and then he found his passion, he found a beautiful woman, he got married. So you have to understand, it's just like writing a little book. So yes, you do have to write a script because the people giving you the money want to see what your ideas are. And then, yes, we would document Jaimen's. I wanted to show everybody how he filmed. You know, he's in the back of how he gets. I suppose it goes back to everyone sees these amazing shots that Jaimen takes. Oh, amazing! Wow, and beautiful. 100 million views. Yay! How does he get them? He sits in the back of a bloody rusty old van. Doesn't even get out. He can't really see what's going on. So his work. Well, it's a little bit of rust. So not his new van. His new van's a beauty. But so I actually had my own ideas. I wanted to show people this, and then of course you write it in. And I knew, like I said before, I knew if we did it took Jaimen a certain place to film, I knew what I thought we would get, and then I just write them down. And then you have to do that, and it gives you a plan to go by. And then as you do the filming, you find extra things come in, and Jaimen has suggestions. Why don't we go and do this, and why don't we go and do that? And I want to see this, and use all his old archive footage and archive stills of the family. So yeah, I thought of it like a book, a linear story. Jaimen's story was beginning, middle, and end. Yeah.
I think, yeah, all I could say is you have to have a plan, or you'd just be filming aimlessly, you know, like even with anything, when I, you know, not so much when I'm trying to film wildlife, I just know what angles I want to try and achieve. But if you go somewhere with your drone and you want to film a gorge, you don't want to get the drone up there and just kind of fly it around and then you think, oh, like I've got no footage to use. You kind of want to get a rough idea, you know, what you want to get. And I've tried doing a few holiday vlogs, like when we go away. And even I like to set out with a little bit of an idea about what I want to come home with, because then you know how to edit it. You know what I mean? Otherwise, if you're filming aimlessly, you don't really end up anywhere.
Okay. And also Derry's question about how do you combine all the the footage from all 14 cameras? So
our editor, and we're shooting 4K, so it's massive data files, most of it. So basically, it's all broken down into the particular cameras, and basically digitized at a lower resolution. So basically you can fit, I don't know, probably hundreds of terabytes, to be honest. On a 4 terabyte drive. So basically it's getting all that high res footage, encoding it to a low res MPEG-4 and retaining the same time code, retaining the same file name so it links back, and then he edits that. And we just know that the master interviews were done on the higher resolution cameras. We knew what Jaimen's, we had folders and folders of Jaimen's footage, and then we just knew what to pick. So they're not all in the same timeline. There's not 14 video tracks, as you know, and hundreds of audio tracks. There's probably ends up being about eight video tracks and I think it's about 30 audio tracks that he worked with. But it's just knowing that, okay, well, we did so-and-so on a GoPro, so we'll just bring the GoPro on. We did so-and-so on Jaimen's 3 drones, we'll bring them in. So, but it does take a lot of times. I think the editing was 20 to 30 weeks. It's very complex, yeah.
Wow, all right. Yeah, it's a massive task there. Now, question number 5 from Eleanor Daly from Bali. Hi, Jaimen. Do you have any favorite documentaries for film students? And for film students, what documentaries or docos would you recommend we watch?
Hello. Firstly, love Bali. We usually come there once a year, so look forward to coming back there. And thank you very much for your question. It's funny, you know, I do have documentaries that I love, and of course, as soon as you get asked the question, I can't remember a single one, but I do remember that I thoroughly enjoyed Blackfish as a documentary. There's one on Netflix that is called Last Breath. That's a really good documentary. And I don't know how particularly good they are. They're not going to teach you, but I think once you've got into filmmaking, everything you watch teaches you, you know, and Last Breath is particularly fantastic. I don't want to spoil it for anyone if you haven't seen it. And if I talk about it too much, I will, but definitely get on Netflix and watch that. And you'll see how they keep you in suspense, thinking one thing, and then all of a sudden it changes. Very good doco. So go check that out. And, you know, I love, of course, on Netflix, David Attenborough's more recent one was a series, but then there's a behind the scenes one. That's just one episode of, I think, 14. And that is incredible. Just shows you, I think they filmed a total of 700 days, people out there, you know, sleeping in these little huts to try and film these tigers that haven't been filmed in a long time. So I believe it's called Planet Earth, and there's a behind the scenes one. That one, that's really good. I'd recommend checking that out.
What about you, Leighton? Do you have any favorites? Yeah,
well, I did work on the first Planet Earth, and we spent a month, running around chasing dolphins, but from the sand dunes. But I think, I like, go to Netflix. There's so many good documentaries, and I just watched so many. Some of the true crime stuff is very interesting. Like Jaimen said, how they put it together, and factually how you research the story, then you present that story. There's a really good series called Last Chance University about the NFL college football players. And it's not just about football, it's actually about the individuals, and a lot of them are from broken homes, a lot of them, you know, from the street. Some of the guys are living in their cars. And so it's all about the people, and the coach, these intense bloody coaches, you know, rah, 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 and how, you know, these kids who probably haven't had it, most of them haven't had a father in their life ever, and how they handle it, and how they're trying to get to their dreams of being these elite sportsmen, and only 1% do. So it's crushing. So Last Chance U is a really good series. And then there's these crazy, there's a thing called Cocaine Island, which was an incredible story. And just how, you know, Netflix is, I've just hooked on Netflix. Yeah. Oh, what's your film on Netflix?
My favorite one? Oh, no. Actually, and you're gonna watch my film. Yes. Woohoo! Thank you so much for the plug there, Leighton. And now we're gonna go to question number 6. This is from Danny Tumbelaka, a photographer, to Jaimen and Leighton. He has, my goodness, 3 questions. Okay. First, what books do you usually read, especially in connection or in relation to documentaries? And then 2, do you always prepare a script before shooting? I think that one was already answered kind of earlier. Number 3, what difficulties usually occur when you use several cameras, and how do you overcome all those differences the cameras produce? Thank you. So.
Did you want to go first?
So first of all, the books, I haven't really read any books to do with photography, to be honest with you. I just like reading a lot of autobiographies, and I'll rattle some off. I've recently read Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. That's a fantastic book. I would recommend reading that. The Happiest Man on Earth by Eddie Jaku, which is about a guy that was in Nazi Germany. Really, really good book. And what's another one? I read Alive, that was about the plane crash in the Andes, the poor people that had to eat each other.
Oh, wow, that one. Yeah, I've heard that.
Started just now reading, which is another really good one. Sorry, I'm glad you asked, because I always want to recommend them to someone, and no one asked. Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, the guy that started Nike. I'm only into that a little bit, but that's really interesting. And I think if anything from those, you get just interesting backstories about what people have been through, what they had to go through, how they started. And it correlates back to, you know, starting your own business, or, you know, if you want to become a professional photographer, they all relate somehow. Absolutely. Second question, don't always have a script by any means. I just go and film, and I kind of know the angles I want to get. It's, you know, a lot of the time I'm just doing it for fun. And I don't recall what number 3 was. I'm very sorry.
Oh, number 3, what difficulties usually occur when you use several cameras, and how do you overcome the differences
I'm really just drawn. So Leighton would need to answer that one.
Okay, go on, Leighton.
Yes, so I love reading books. Netflix is now my electronic book, unfortunately, but yes. So, and I've told Jaimen these, I love biographies because they're real stories, biographies or historical stories. So definitely read Mike Tyson, the boxer's biography. I thought that was incredible. Arnold Schwarzenegger, like Jaimen said, how his beginnings. There's a rock star here called Jimmy Barnes. If you're an older fella, but he's an Australian rock star. And his story is amazing, because he came from nothing, abusive home, and then, you know, became into a rock star. So, and there was an amazing story. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the, you know, Moby Dick the whale, the giant sperm whale. Well, it was actually based on a true story, and it's the story of this gigantic whale that sunk this Nantucket whaler in Tahiti. And I dived a lot and worked in Tahiti, and it's an amazing story. So the author who wrote the fiction was on that boat or heard of that story, and he wrote the story about Moby Dick on it. So script, yes, everything we do is scripted. It's not scripted. If you're just going out to get general shots, you've still got to have an idea in mind, or like establishing shots, your middle shots, and then your end shots. So whatever you shoot, you should, even if you don't have a script, have in mind what you want to achieve with the footage, and then shoot accordingly. Like I said, get your wide shots, then get in on the action, and then whatever happens, go back wide again, get whatever's happening leaving. So then it's good for the editor. And this is a horrendous question, the camera, it's a nightmare, absolute nightmare. We had so many technical difficulties. The biggest issue that we had is that Jaimen's film was going up as a cinema film, so it had to be as best as we could make it. Surprising, some of the $500 cameras and $600 cameras like the GoPros and the action cams stood up incredibly well, whereas some of the shots from the Red and the Sony FS7s broke down. So what you're doing is going through, you have to have a very good grader. And our grader was superb, and you have to watch every corner of the picture and watch it sideways and watch it upside down and watch for glitches, because we had a pretty strenuous time where all these glitches would appear once you start pushing them in the grade. Like we were saying, when you start pushing colors and taking noise out, there's always an equal or opposite reaction. So we went through about 3 months technically preparing the film, and it went back to the it gets Tech QC, quality control, to send it over to the East Coast, and they do all movies, and they will watch it, and a machine tells you what colors are right and what brightness levels are wrong and all the glitches. And some glitches I've never seen in my life would come up, and it's like, nah! Then you have to send the whole film back. We're very lucky that Jaimen's smallest and cheapest drone gave us no problems, whereas the biggest, most expensive one, in some areas, these things were happening. It's like, oh my God. And then even my big cameras in situations where things were happening. So it's a nightmare. But the issue for us is that we were delivering it to NHK Japan, and NHK Japan invented high def, invented ultra high def, invented 8K, and they're very technically. So we really scrutinized every picture, and luckily they came back with no issues, thank goodness. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. But to the person who asked the question, yes, you have to really also know your camera equipment and know what you can push it, and expect problems, because then you know how you're going to learn how to deal with them. Yeah.
Yeah, so that has to be thought out in pre-production, I guess, to make sure that we avoid that nightmare happening after.
It does, but then stuff happens that you just don't know about, and stuff with audio happens, and you think, oh my God, why? Yeah.
So there you go. That's one of the challenges that you would have to face if you use 14 cameras.
Yes.
Another question is from Winda, from Institut Seni Indonesia Denpasar. Thank you for sharing your tips and experiences. Can I ask you guys, how do you pour emotions into your video? Because for Winda, apparently for her, it's hard to give the footage that I have an emotion, and then it just becomes emotionless. It's just a picture that doesn't say anything. Thank you.
Good music is the. Okay, am I still connected or no?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Jaimen.
Oh, sorry. I think, would you agree, Leighton? Good music and sound effects is the best way to do it. All means, yeah. Go to something like.
Yeah.
Sorry. Particularly with wildlife footage and stuff like that, with the drone, you know what I mean? You can. It's hard to, I guess, give an emotion other than just by going to there's programs like Artlist or Music Bed, or even I just Google free like music that can be used on YouTube. Unless you're filming a subject like a person where they're telling an emotional story, that's all I could suggest is music, really, you know.
That's true. And that's what we're sort of ignoring, is that we had it, you know, like in your film, Marissa, we had a composer, and the editor was very experienced, and then the grader, and so you had those three different things, audio, visual, combining, and they grade the picture, which means, you know, putting color contrast into it, maybe degrading it, and then using the music, and then we also had we had a sound mixer, obviously. But there's the sound designer who would sit there, and he would put, you know, wind, birds, thunder, lightning. So sound's very important to help Winda with her emotions. Sound is very important, and that's not just music. That's all the sound effects. And I think Jaimen had never seen it in a cinema. I think it's pretty blown away. He just heard the low res versions on his Mac or whatever. And then we went to the cinema, it's like, and then in the cinema, when there's some key moments, we had this big bass when Jaimen's bike hit the ground and he hurts his neck. We didn't have his horrible, but this thing goes, and it goes, and actually rattles your chest, and it's like, holy, you know what, you know. So it sounds very important, yeah.
Well, a great way to, you know, is I watched a 2-hour, 40-minute version of the documentary, you know, before it was cut down. And that was prior to really them putting much music with it. And you're kind of sitting there like, it's good, but like, I don't know how good it is. But then when you watched it in the cinema, I was like, oh shit, they've done a good job, because it has all those bits. So when it's meant to be, you know, when we're talking about the torment of my accident, the music matches, you know, and everything like that. So that would be the only thing. And then perhaps, you know when you watch infomercials and it's pretty obvious, but they are talking about a mop and it's like the mop that's no good versus their amazing new one. They put it in black and white versus the new amazing ones in color. You know what I mean? So perhaps dramatize with some pulling down the colors a bit darker or something like that.
All right. So it's everything. It's the sound, it's how you use some sort of filter, like what you've mentioned, black and white, and also more vibrant sort of like a filter and all that. Also the sound, the importance of sound and music to support or to create a certain emotion.
Yeah, you can add movement to your shot. I forgot to say, if you wanted slow movement, slow zooms or hands or tilts. I know you can select parts of the thing to go out of focus. So you just, when we did Jaimen's key interview, we defocused the background a lot because it was very hard to control the light. So we defocused the background so he stood out a bit more. And also what got back to the grading is that she touched stuff up on his forehead and she decolorized his beard. And I'm thinking, oh, she had all these mats and things going all on his face, something that I wasn't aware of. And it's subtle, but it all adds to that emotion, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we actually have so many more questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So thank you so much, Jaimen, and also Leighton, for sharing and delivering and just sharing your insights around documentary filmmaking and also drone cinematography. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our participants have learned a lot from the time that you've spent with us and the knowledge that you've shared with us. I would like to also say thank you. Terima kasih kepada rekan-rekan atas pertanyaannya. Mohon maaf sekali tidak bisa dijawab semua pertanyaannya. Mungkin ada sebuah mekanisme ya, Ellie. Ada beberapa pertanyaan yang belum dijawab. Apakah kira-kira mereka bisa email ke email dari Kedutaan Besar Australia sehingga bisa disampaikan ke Jaimen dan juga Leighton jika mereka ada waktu untuk dijawab, begitu ya, Ellie ya. Okay, well, thank you so much again, Jaimen and Leighton, and thank you so much as well for all of the participants attending. For now, I will bring it back to Ellie.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you so much, Marissa. Oh, sorry, Jaimen, I won't cut you off.
I do apologize. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone joining and taking time to ask a question. And I don't want you to think they'll go unanswered. So do email them through or come to my Instagram, send me a message. I'm on holiday, so I won't send them back straight away, but I will when I get back home. I'll make sure they get answered because we do appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much there, Jaimen. Oh, I also forgot one thing, Ellie, before I give it back to you. Bagi yang belum nonton filmnya Jaimen dan juga Leighton, bisa ditonton lagi. Kemarin memang weekend kemarin sudah tayang, tapi jangan khawatir karena ini akan tayang lagi di hari Minggu, tanggal 27 Juni jam 20.30 waktu Indonesia Barat. Jadi kalian bisa menikmati, bagi kalian yang belum menikmati gambar-gambar indah dan cerita inspiratif dari dokumenter From Sky to Sea ini. Alright, thank you so much. Back to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much, Marissa, Jaimen, and Leighton. It was extraordinary to have you guys able to speak today. Dan terima kasih sekali lagi kepada Institut Seni Indonesia Denpasar, Badan Kreatif Denpasar, Stikom, dan Pembicara sebagai partner kami atas kerjasama dalam masterclass ini. Acara masterclass hari ini segera selesai, namun rangkaian acara FSAI 2021 masih akan terus berlanjut dengan tanggal 27 Juni tahun ini. Semua film FSAI 2021 tersebut dapat langsung diakses oleh teman-teman yang hadir hari ini secara gratis melalui website fsai2021.com. Silakan daftar online dan pilih film yang ingin dinonton. Juga kami masih punya satu masterclass lagi besok hari Kamis jam 10 waktu Indonesia Barat atau jam 11 waktu Indonesia Tengah dengan topik menciptakan konten animasi bersama Kristen Silvers, Nadine States, and Ryan Greaves. They're multi-award-winning and internationally acclaimed production company based in Australia. And lastly, thank you so much to the Australian Embassy in Jakarta. These events are only successful because of the hard work behind the scenes, especially to the FSAI team in Jakarta led by Emma Burke and to a wonderful team that includes Mbak Sulis, Mbak Nia, and Mbak Fina. Finally, terima kasih banyak. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Namo Buddhaya, Om Shanti, 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 Om. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you at the next masterclass. Bye.
Thank you. Sehat selalu. Stay safe, stay healthy, guys. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Do we just leave? Or? Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say to the animals of Sanctuary City?
Yeah, I'm going back to bed.